In this city of sin, the only thing a man can rely on is himself, his gun, and a beautiful dame. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a graphic novel that I read. I am back on that graphic novel grind. And today's story is all about sin, murder, and beautiful women. I am referring to Sin City, The Hard Goodbye by Frank Miller, which was published around 1991. I've talked about Frank Miller on this channel before, so I don't need to go into that great of detail, but he is a comic book writer who has been writing since the 1980s. Very well known for writing for DC, Marvel, and Dark Horse Comics, as you see in this particular story. He's written The Dark Knight Returns, which I wasn't a fan of, Daredevil Born Again, Batman Year One, Sin City, and quite a few more stories which have garnered some notoriety. His stories are darker in tone, which a lot of people love. Other people say is just trying to be too edgy. I think there can be an argument made for both, as I'll talk about in today's story. It's a pretty interesting author, and one of the top dogs of comic book sort of writing and whatnot. And so without further ado, let's talk about Sin City. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Sin City focuses on Marv. He is a hardened ex-con, perhaps a criminal with a shady past, who is sort of down on his luck, but he meets a woman named Goldie at a bar, who we later find out is a high-end prostitute. And he they go home together, and he has a great time with Goldie, saying that someone who looks like him shouldn't be around someone so beautiful, but he's not going to question his luck here. And after they have sex, he falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he discovers that Goldie has been killed in a very subtle manner, without any bullets or anything to wake him up. And so he's worried at first, but then he realizes when he hears the police sirens that this is a frame job, that someone has bought the police and is wanted to kill Goldie and wanted to frame him in the process. And so he goes and sets about finding out who killed this woman that he loves, even though he knew her for a brief time. He reclaims his gun from his mother's house. He fights some hitmen and kills them, as well as a priest who tells him that Patrick Henry Rourke has something to do with this, and directs him toward a farm where he can find out more information. While Marv is going about his business, a mysterious woman who vaguely resembles Goldie is trying to kill him, but he manages to escape a couple times. And then Marv makes it to a farmhouse where he is sort of caught unaware by a terrible murderer man named Kevin, who catches Marv and puts him in his sort of dungeon area, along with another woman that Marv knows, Lucille, who's very worried and notes that Kevin is a cannibal, he's the son of Patrick Henry Rourke, and he's going to kill and presumably eat Marv and Lucille. However, Marv manages to break out of this sort of dungeon area while Kevin is away, and he manages to escape with Lucille. But unfortunately, some secret forces, bodyguards for Patrick Henry Rourke, see them trying to escape and kill Lucille in the process. Marv manages to catch the special forces people unaware and kills them and takes their coat in the process. And it is there that we learn a little bit more about Patrick Henry Rourke, who is a beacon for this Basin City, Sin City for short. But he's a priest of some sort, like a cardinal, very well regarded, although he's heavily engaged in corruption and whatnot. Marv decides that he's somewhat responsible for Goldie's death, so Marv decides that he has to die. Patrick ends up running across a woman named Wendy, who is Goldie's twin, and she wants to kill Marv because she thinks he's responsible for Goldie's death, and when she finds out that he's not, she decides to work alongside him, and so they go back to the farm, and Marv manages to catch Kevin and sets him in a trap, and his Kevin's dog eats Kevin while he's dying, but Marv notes that Kevin doesn't scream or anything, which is very sinister. He then launches an assault on the Rourke compound, killing many of Rourke's men, and then confronting Rourke, who reveals that he knew about Kevin's sort of cannibalism, but felt that it made him closer to God, and also engaged in some cannibalism with him. And that's Goldie must have found out, so that's why Rourke had her killed. Marv then proceeds to massacre, gut, and just annihilate Rourke, and after he manages to do that, he is shot by some special forces police that enter into this compound, but he's not directly killed. He's arrested, and then because he's been shot, he's sort of on life support, but he manages to come back from that, and Marv notes that they have to hold somebody accountable, so they basically pin everything on Marv, and he has a trial that is unfair, and he's found guilty, and the judge even sentences him to death. And while he's on death row, he's visited by Wendy, who presumably has sex with him and allows him to call her Goldie. So he gets that one last moment with Goldie that he praised so highly. And as the story comes to a close, he is then executed after getting a steak dinner. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there is a fair bit to talk about with Sin City, a particularly dark comic from Dark Horse Comics. It's very well known, very well regarded, and I can see why here. But there are a couple of problems which I'll note later on. But one of the main themes that Frank Miller is working with here, of course, in Sin City, you're dealing with sin and ruin. Sin City and Marv exist in a state of despair, of disrepair. Sin City has seen better days, but it has since fallen into corruption, murder, sin, vice, all sorts of things like that. And Marv is no different. He might have been a great person at one time, or maybe he was never a great person, but he is he's resorted to murder, hurting other people, gutting them, prostitution, going to strip clubs and various things like that. And you can also see this on his sort of character design, where he's just slowly being covered with bandages. He's barely maintaining himself together. He's covered in scars. He does not look good. He has seen better days. And all of this is kind of tied together by murder, cannibalism, prostitution, a desolate environment. You would not want to be in Sin City, and I don't think you would want to be around Marv, who seems to hate and despise everything, including himself. But Marv notes that he does want to be better. He's trying to be a good person. Like, he was with Goldie and he thought, well, maybe this is a hope for the future, and that was immediately taken away because Sin City can't let anyone be happy. And it seems like he's constantly brought down to Sin City's level rather than being allowed to thrive or do good things. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. "And there's no thinking and no need for it. The instincts take over white hot. The animal in me I try to drown in booze and bloody brawls. He's back. He's back and he's howling. He's laughing out loud. He's crazy with the pure sweet hate of it all." So he's trying to dim down an aspect of himself, but the city seems to bring it out. And the city won't let him sort of maintain a sort of positive demeanor or anything like that. It keeps throwing stuff at him. And you might argue, well, surely Marv should just leave. But one, that's not always possible for everyone, especially people with maybe Marv's financial background. But also, Marv specifically notes that he loves it here. So, the city is an ugly place, but he views himself as an ugly person, and maybe he revels in this chaos and this destruction. However, this proves to be his downfall, because Marv is the monster that the city made, going through everyone, killing everyone who he views as responsible for Goldie. And the city now needs him dead because he serves some sort of function. And so it executes him. It's very simple, very to the point. Marv is a monster. Marv is an agent of chaos, and the city cannot allow for him to get one over on it. So it has to see him dead, which I think is a very interesting kind of ending. I think it is left to a little bit of interpretation there, but it is also very blunt. Like Marv is dead now. This is the end for him, presumably. Frank Miller is also touching upon the idea of the anti-hero. Anti-heroes are not, regular heroes. They're vigilantes. They're people who are not really out for good, Deadpool types or Wolverine types, people who might do good things, but they're doing it for themselves. They're doing it because it's in their own self-interest rather than a desire to see great things happen to the world. And that's Marv right there. He is a broken down former criminal who, spends his times at strip clubs, spends his time at bars with prostitutes, and doesn't really think that he's going to get much from the world. So he's not in this for good. He's in this for himself and for Goldie. He wants to avenge Goldie. He doesn't care that Cardinal Rourke is a terrible human being who has sort of grabbed this city and done with what he wants. He doesn't care that Kevin is a cannibal tormenting these women. He cares that Goldie was affected by all of this. If Goldie never entered his life, he might never have a problem with Kevin, although maybe he might because he has a thing for dames. But again, that's his own self-interest right there. So very, very interesting to see Miller's take on the anti-hero here. I do have at least one problem with this, and that is the sexism and homophobia that's present in this particular comic. This was written at a time, where there were a lot of comics coming out that were particularly edgy and wanted to show you how different it was, like The Mask or The Crow in particular, or later on you would see Kick-Ass, which years difference there, but similar ideas, similar takes and spins on the superhero sort of genre. And you see a little bit of sexism and homophobia here. One particular example is how Marv has a woman friend named Lucille who is a lesbian, and he keeps remarking how Lucille has a great body and they should have a role in the hay, and he gets a smack for it in the past when he said that, but he keeps reiterating how he wishes she wasn't a lesbian because she has a great body, and that maybe that's something that people actually think, but it's very weird to focus on that. And you could argue that it's part of the atmosphere that Marv is not a hero, he's not a good man, so of course he's thinking stuff like that. But part of me, I've seen this in enough Frank Miller stories to wonder, is he doing a commentary on superheroes, on comic books in general, or is he playing it straight? Is this just something that he sees as normal? Is this something that he sees as heroic? And I feel like someone might argue that I'm overreacting, that I'm reading too far into this, but comic books in general are filled with large amounts of sexism and homophobia and racism and whatnot. And so it's important to acknowledge it when we see it. So I do wonder if this is him sort of doing a commentary critique on comic books, or if it's played straight. And that kind of changes my interpretation of the material. But given what he said about or the Dark Knight Returns, given what he wrote there, it feels like this is pretty straightforward, that this is what he sees as maybe heroic. But I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, at least. I just feel like it's important to acknowledge what I'm seeing here. I also really like the noir setting that Frank Miller uses. This is the sort of essence of noir. He's distilled it down to its truest form. Just a hard-nosed, criminal trying to make things right in the world around him, but being met with more violence and death and destruction as well. And so I do like how Miller makes use of the noir setting. And the minimalist art that he uses as well really adds to it, because a lot of it is just shades of black and white. You don't really see characters' faces at times, and there's not a whole lot of detail to the environment, which could have brought this down, but in the artist still manages to be very beautiful, and you get what the characters are feeling. Sometimes the shame, sometimes the anger that they're feeling, sometimes the horrific thoughts they might be thinking as well. It does, the minimalist art doesn't really drag it down, and it sort of amplifies the story that Miller is talking about here, which it goes in contrast to like what he did with Daredevil Born Again, which is very vibrant, very lively. You really see the city of New York. You really see like what Daredevil is trying to do and the expression on his face and all of that. It's such in contrast. Like if I didn't already know that these two things came from the same person, I would be surprised to find that out. And then the other thing that I really like about this is sort of the use of violence, how it's implied. You never directly see bad things happening to these characters because of the minimalist art, but enough of it happens sort of off screen, and you see what Marv is thinking as he's trying to hurt both Kevin and Patrick Henry Rourke, and it's awful, it's horrendous, but you never see it, and so like your imagination takes over, and like your imagination can conjure far worse things than Frank Miller could maybe depict on a comic book panel. So I think it really works to his credit that he doesn't directly show all that violence happening. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Sin City by Frank Miller. I did enjoy this comic book. I enjoyed this graphic novel, and I think it does have a place in talking about some of the best graphic novels out there. But there are a few problems, particularly the edginess and the need and the over-reliance on like sexism and homophobia, which would kind of grip comic books for 20 years, and is still somewhat of a problem with comic books. And it's important to acknowledge it, because if comic books aren't welcoming of everyone, even if you're just like using it as part of the atmosphere, I feel like there would have been a better way to like sort of display Marv's sort of depravity without over relying on his views of like homophobia and sort of showing his sexism. But I feel like if comic books are going to be a welcoming place, we need to figure out how to like write these sort of stories in a better way. That isn't to say I didn't like it, but I just wanted to acknowledge the problem there, and I do think it's worth checking out and possibly finding at your local library, if they have comic books and other such things. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below, especially on the character of Marv, because he is very interesting. Seems like a sort of inverse Batman of sorts, someone who's only in it for themselves and knows that they're not the hero at all, that they're only driven by revenge, and yet they continue on until they're finally killed. Definitely worth talking about there. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, so that more people can find out about this story if they don't already know, as well as Frank Miller. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and sinful travels. Farewell.